Have you ever woken up in the morning, looked at your health numbers, and quietly wondered, what if something simple could actually help my blood sugar? Not a complicated diet, not a dozen expensive supplements, just something small, something natural, something sitting right there in your kitchen. Now picture this for a moment. It's early morning, the kind of quiet morning where the house feels calm and the sun is just starting to peek through the curtains. And a 67-year-old man named Harold is sitting at his kitchen table holding a small glucose meter in his hand, squinting at the numbers like they just personally offended him. And Harold sighs a little because those numbers have been creeping up for months now. Not dangerously high yet, but high enough that his doctor gave him that look. You know, the look doctors give when they're trying to be polite, but also trying to say, you really need to watch this. And Harold nods. Of course he nods. He promises he'll eat better, promises he'll move more, promises he'll keep an eye on things. But deep down he's thinking the same thing many people over 60 think. Life was easier when your body didn't need constant maintenance. When you could eat pancakes without calculating carbohydrates like a math problem. When your energy didn't crash in the middle of the afternoon like your body suddenly forgot how fuel works. And so Harold sits there that morning, rubbing his forehead when his daughter walks in and says something that sounds almost too simple to matter. She says, "Dad, why don't you start drinking ginger tea in the morning?" And Harold laughs a little, not meanly, just surprised. Because in his mind, ginger is that spicy root you see in the grocery store next to garlic. Something people put in fancy recipes, not exactly something you expect to influence blood sugar levels. But his daughter shrugs and says, "I read about it. Apparently, it can help the body handle sugar better." And Harold raises an eyebrow because people read a lot of things online these days. But he also figures, well, a cup of tea isn't exactly risky. So the next morning, he slices a small piece of ginger, drops it into hot water, waits a few minutes while the steam curls into the air. And when he takes the first sip, his face scrunches, just a little, because ginger has that sharp kick to it. That warm, spicy punch that wakes up your senses almost instantly. But he keeps sipping, slowly, and something about it feels comforting. Maybe it's the warmth. Maybe it's the routine. Maybe it's just the idea that he's trying something new for his health. And days pass, then a week passes, and something subtle begins to happen. Not dramatic, not fireworks, just small changes. Harold notices he doesn't feel that heavy, sluggish crash after breakfast like he used to. His stomach feels calmer. His energy stays steadier through the morning. And when he checks his blood sugar one day, he pauses for a second, because the number staring back at him is a little lower than usual. Not perfect, not miracle level, but noticeably better. And that's the moment curiosity kicks in, because now Harold is thinking, okay, wait a second. What exactly is this ginger stuff doing? And that question is actually a good one, because ginger has been used for thousands of years in traditional medicine across cultures, long before modern laboratories started studying it. And inside that oddly shaped little root are powerful, natural compounds, gingerols and shogols, that scientists believe help reduce inflammation and improve how the body responds to insulin. And insulin, as you probably know, is the hormone that helps move sugar out of the bloodstream and into your cells where it becomes energy. But as people get older, the body sometimes becomes less sensitive to insulin, which means sugar stays in the bloodstream longer than it should. And that's when blood sugar levels start creeping up, sometimes slowly, sometimes without obvious symptoms. And that's why so many adults over 60 are told they're borderline or pre-diabetic, words that sound harmless but carry a quiet warning behind them. Because unmanaged blood sugar can affect the heart, the nerves, the kidneys, even the brain over time. And here's where ginger becomes interesting, because some studies suggest that regular ginger consumption may help improve insulin sensitivity which basically means the body becomes a little better at using insulin the way it's supposed to, like reminding the body how to unlock doors that had started sticking. And ginger also appears to slow down how quickly food leaves the stomach, which may help prevent those rapid spikes in blood sugar after meals. And when spikes become smaller and more gradual, the body handles glucose in a much smoother way. Almost like the difference between pouring water slowly into a glass versus dumping the whole pitcher at once. And Harold doesn't know any of this science at first, of course. He's just a retired man enjoying his morning tea. But he does notice that something about this new habit feels good. And so the routine continues. Every morning the kettle whistles softly. The ginger slices drop into the cup. The aroma fills the kitchen. And over time, the ritual becomes something he actually looks forward to. Because habits have a strange power in life, especially small ones. Small habits quietly shape the direction of health in ways that big dramatic changes sometimes fail to do. And that's why simple routines are often talked about in communities and channels focused on healthy aging. Because people over 60 aren't usually looking for extreme solutions anymore. They're looking for sustainable ones, realistic ones. The kind you can actually keep doing for years instead of weeks. And ginger tea fits perfectly into that category because it doesn't require complicated preparation. It doesn't cost much, and it takes maybe 10 minutes from start to finish. Yet the body seems to respond in several ways beyond blood sugar alone. Digestion improves for many people because ginger stimulates digestive enzymes and helps food move through the stomach more smoothly, which can reduce bloating and discomfort after meals. Circulation may improve slightly because ginger can help relax blood vessels. And that warming sensation you feel when you drink ginger tea isn't just flavor. It's part of ginger's natural effect on the body's metabolism. And interestingly, ginger is also known for its anti-inflammatory properties, which matter a lot more than most people realize because chronic inflammation is quietly connected to many age-related health problems, including insulin resistance, joint pain, fatigue, and cardiovascular stress. So when a person regularly consumes anti-inflammatory foods, the body may gradually shift toward a calmer internal environment, less like a constant low-grade fire, and more like a system that has a chance to repair itself. And this is why traditional remedies sometimes survive thousands of years of use. Not because they are magical, but because generations of people noticed consistent benefits long before scientific explanations existed. And Harold eventually learns some of this from his doctor during a routine visit when the doctor notices Harold's blood sugar readings have improved slightly compared to previous months. And the doctor asks what changes he has made recently. And Harold almost laughs when he answers, because it feels ridiculous to say that a cup of ginger tea might have helped. But the doctor doesn't laugh. The doctor nods thoughtfully and says something interesting. He says that while ginger tea alone isn't a cure for blood sugar problems, it absolutely can be part of a supportive routine for metabolic health, especially when combined with balanced meals and regular movement. And hearing that gives Harold a strange sense of encouragement because it means this simple habit actually has some real logic behind it. And that's when he decides to keep doing it, not just occasionally, but consistently. Because consistency is where small health practices turn into real lifestyle changes. And slowly the morning tea becomes something more than just a drink. It becomes a quiet moment of control over his health. A reminder that even at 67, he still has influence over how his body feels and functions. And that feeling, the feeling that your daily choices still matter, is incredibly powerful. Especially for older adults who sometimes feel like aging means losing control. But the truth is, aging doesn't remove the body's ability to respond to healthy habits. It simply means the body appreciates those habits even more. And this is exactly why small natural routines, like drinking ginger tea in the morning, continue to gain attention among people looking for gentle ways to support their well-being. Because sometimes the most effective habits are the ones that slide easily into daily life without requiring extreme effort. And Harold eventually begins recommending the tea to friends during morning walks in the park. Not in a preachy way, just casually, saying something like, "Hey, I started drinking ginger tea in the morning. And you know what? I actually feel better." And some friends laugh. Some friends shrug, but a few decide to try it themselves. Because curiosity spreads quickly when people hear simple ideas that sound harmless yet promising. And maybe you're sitting there right now, thinking the same thing Harold thought that first morning. Could something this simple really make a difference? And that's actually a good question to ask, because curiosity is the first step toward discovering small habits that might quietly improve your health over time. And the funny thing about small habits is that they rarely feel important at first. They feel ordinary, almost too ordinary to matter. Yet weeks pass, and those tiny choices begin stacking up quietly like bricks, building a wall you didn't even realize you were constructing. And Harold starts noticing this in subtle ways that catch him off guard. Because one morning he wakes up and realizes he slept better the night before. Another day, he notices that his usual mid-afternoon energy crash didn't hit him as hard as it used to. And these changes aren't dramatic enough to make headlines, but they're real enough for him to pause and think, okay, something's definitely different. And so the ginger tea continues to appear on his kitchen table every morning like clockwork. Steam rising gently from the cup while the smell of that warm, spicy root fills the air. And if you've ever smelled fresh ginger steeping in hot water, you know the scent has this sharp, earthy brightness that almost wakes up your senses before you even take a sip. And Harold begins to appreciate that moment in a way he never expected, because it becomes more than just tea. It becomes a small daily pause before the noise of the day begins. And in a world where people rush through mornings checking phones, stressing about schedules, and gulping down coffee half awake, that quiet ritual starts to feel almost luxurious, like giving the body and mind a chance to wake up together instead of being shoved into the day abruptly. And what Harold doesn't fully realize yet is that this calm routine actually supports blood sugar control in another indirect way, because stress, hormones like cortisol, can push glucose levels higher when the body feels constantly tense or rushed. So starting the day with a calm habit, even something as simple as sipping tea slowly, can help the body stay in a more balanced state. And that's one reason many health experts now talk about morning rituals instead of just morning diets. Because how you begin the day often shapes how your metabolism behaves for hours afterward. And ginger itself continues playing its quiet role inside the body, because those active compounds, gingerols and shogols, keep doing what they've always done, supporting circulation, reducing inflammation, and helping the digestive system work a little more smoothly. And digestion is more important to blood sugar than many people realize, because when the stomach processes food efficiently, nutrients are absorbed in a steadier way instead of overwhelming the bloodstream all at once. And Harold begins to notice this, especially after meals that used to leave him feeling heavy or bloated, because now his stomach feels lighter, calmer, almost like the system is running with less friction. And one afternoon, while chatting with a friend named Carl at the park bench near their usual walking path, Harold casually mentions the ginger tea again, and Carl chuckles and says something like, "Man, next thing you'll tell me is tea can fix my knees too." And they both laugh, because aging has a way of turning every conversation toward joints and energy levels and doctor visits eventually. But Harold shrugs and says, "Hey, I'm just telling you what I noticed." And Carl decides to try it mostly out of curiosity, not expecting much. And that's the interesting thing about natural health habits. Most people approach them with a little skepticism at first. which honestly is probably healthy because skepticism keeps people from believing every wild claim on the internet. But sometimes curiosity pushes past that skepticism just enough for someone to experiment with something simple and harmless. And that's exactly what happens over the next few weeks as more of Harold's friends start asking him questions about how he prepares the tea. And he explains in the simplest way possible, because there really isn't much to it. Just slice a small piece of fresh ginger root, drop it into hot water, let it steep for 5 or 10 minutes, and drink it warm. Sometimes adding lemon or a tiny bit of honey if you want a little sweetness. And people are almost disappointed by how simple the recipe is, because we've been conditioned to believe health solutions must be complicated to be effective. Yet history shows that many of the most enduring wellness practices are incredibly simple. And ginger tea is one of those things that quietly survived thousands of years of human use across different cultures. From traditional Chinese medicine to Ayurvedic practices in India, long before modern research began investigating why these traditions kept recommending the same plant over and over again. And modern studies have gradually started confirming what ancient cultures suspected, that ginger has measurable effects on inflammation, metabolism, and digestive function. And when those systems improve even slightly, the body's ability to regulate blood sugar often improves as well. Because metabolism isn't controlled by just one factor. It's influenced by a web of systems working together. And sometimes supporting one piece of that web helps stabilize the whole structure. And Harold eventually returns to his doctor for another routine checkup several months after starting the ginger tea habit, and he doesn't even think to mention the tea at first, because by now it feels like such a normal part of his routine that it barely registers as a health strategy. But when the doctor reviews his latest blood work, there's a moment of quiet surprise in the room, because the numbers have improved more than expected. Not in a dramatic miracle way, but enough to show clear progress. And the doctor asks again if Harold changed anything about his routine diet, exercise, sleep, and Harold thinks for a second before saying, almost sheepishly, "Well, I've been drinking ginger tea every morning." And the doctor nods thoughtfully and says something that sticks with Harold long after the appointment ends. He says, "Sometimes small habits are exactly what the body needs. Not shock therapy, just consistent support." And that sentence becomes something Harold repeats to himself often, because it feels strangely empowering, especially for someone who once believed aging meant slowly losing control over health. And instead, he begins to see aging as a stage of life where daily choices become even more meaningful, where small supportive habits might actually have greater impact than they did decades earlier. And as months continue passing, the ginger tea remains part of Harold's mornings, sometimes enjoyed while reading the newspaper, sometimes while sitting quietly near the window, watching the neighborhood wake up. And there's a certain peacefulness in that moment, because it reminds him that health doesn't always require dramatic transformation. Sometimes it simply requires attention, patience, and consistency. And perhaps the most surprising part of Harold's story is how many other people begin trying the same habit after hearing about it. Because humans naturally share things that help them feel better, especially within communities of older adults who value practical advice over flashy trends. And before long, several people in Harold's walking group mentioned that they've started drinking ginger tea too, each person noticing slightly different benefits. One says their digestion improved. Another says they feel warmer in the mornings. Someone else says their energy doesn't dip as sharply after breakfast. And while these experiences vary, they all point toward the same underlying truth, that small natural habits can support the body in quiet ways. And if you're listening to this story right now, you might be wondering whether ginger tea could play a similar role in your own routine. And that's a fair question, because every body is different, and no single habit works identically for everyone. Yet the beauty of something like ginger tea is that it's simple enough to try without major risk or expense. And sometimes experimenting with gentle daily practices becomes the beginning of a larger awareness about personal health. The kind of awareness that leads people to move a little more, eat a little better, and pay closer attention to how their body responds to different routines. And if there's one lesson hidden inside Harold's experience, it might be this. The body often responds best to steady, supportive habits rather than extreme short-term changes. And that realization brings a kind of relief because it means improving health doesn't have to feel like climbing a mountain. Sometimes it simply means adjusting the direction of daily life, one small step at a time. One warm cup at a time, one quiet morning moment at a time. And maybe tomorrow morning, someone listening to this story will slice a piece of ginger, drop it into hot water, and sit down with that steaming cup wondering whether such a small ritual could really influence something as complex as blood sugar. And perhaps after a few weeks, they'll begin noticing small differences just like Harold did. The kind of differences that don't shout for attention, but gently remind you that the body is always responding to what you give it, always adapting, always searching for balance. And that realization alone can change how a person approaches health for the rest of their life. For anyone over 60 who is curious about trying ginger tea for blood sugar support, remember that consistency matters far more than intensity. So start with one simple cup in the morning and allow it to become part of a calm, daily routine rather than treating it like a quick fix. And if you already manage blood sugar conditions or take medications, it's always wise to mention new dietary habits to your doctor so they can help monitor changes safely. Because the real goal isn't replacing medical care, but supporting the body in natural ways that complement professional guidance. And if you found this story helpful, consider sharing it with a friend or family member who might benefit from learning how a simple kitchen ingredient could become a small but meaningful step toward better health and steadier blood sugar over time.